Excellent. Okay. Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's session on cannabis. Let's chatter about Shatter. Today, we are joined by Julie Rudkowski, Addie August, and myself, Gemma Greenwood. So I think Addie may be running a little bit late. I can't see her that she's joined just yet. So we will get started. Addie is going to be our peer for today. So hopefully she can join us. I would like to now pass it over to Julie to introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Julie Rudkowski, and I am a settler mainly from Eastern European background. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I am a nursing practice consultant for mental health and substance use with FNHA's Four Directions team. And I am calling in today from the traditional unceded homeland of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations.
Thank you so much, Julie. Hi, everyone. As I said at the very beginning, my name is Gemma Greenwood. I am also a white settler from European background. I am extremely lucky to live and play on the traditional and unceded territory of the Squamish Nation. I am a learning consultant at FNHA working on developing cannabis resources for nurses and healthcare providers. And so now we would like to open up the floor to everyone who has joined us. And in your own good way, we would like you to, using the chat, I guess I should say that, to please go ahead and introduce yourself. So, and where are you zooming in from today so that we could see everyone who is on the call? So go ahead and use the chat. Whilst you're doing that, I am going to play a video from our friend and colleague, Lempier, who very eloquently places the importance as to why it's so crucial that we do these territory acknowledgements at the beginning of any meeting or session like this. So happy listening whilst you're all adding in to the chat.
Aswell, Meetsep Kwakwilam. Good day, everyone, and welcome. My name is Len Pierre. My ancestral name is Palikulak, and I am Coast Salish from Katzie First Nation. I am the regional coordinator for Indigenous Cultural Safety at Fraser Health, and here we welcome everyone who is in a position of hosting formal meetings, presentations, or conferences to begin the event with a traditional territorial acknowledgement. And while many of us may be wondering why it is that we do the territorial acknowledgement, and there are many reasons for that, one way that I like to do the territorial acknowledgement is I ask my participants to sit and reflect and think for a moment, where is it in their neighborhood, their community, wherever it is in the Lower Mainland, that they like to go to unplug, unwind, and disconnect from the chaos of life and get away from the streets and the noisy cars and the glass and concrete. For many of us, it could be down by the ocean, enjoying the breeze and the beautiful water. For many of us, it can be in our local green space in our neighborhood, a park where we can play with our kids or take the dog for a walk. Or for many of us, it's retreating into the mountains to go for a hike. And for many of us, like myself, it's getting down to the Fraser River and spending time by the water there. Wherever it is, and whatever peace that brings to your life, and whatever feelings that brings up for you, when we do the territory acknowledgement, we are giving thanks, recognizing and honoring the land on which we live and play. It's also our way to thank the First Nations communities that have protected and been stewards of the land since the beginning of time. And we're honoring and recognizing the First Nations communities who continue to defend the landways and waterways and airways that we enjoy so much. And it's a small thing that we can all do in our professional practice to advance cultural safety and humility and honor the truth and reconciliation calls to action within the healthcare setting. With that, I would like to recognize and honor that we are gathered together today to learn, share, and work on the traditional, unceded, and ancestral territories of the Coast Salish and the Nlaka'pamux First Nations territories. Thank you all.
And thank you so much to our dear friend Len for letting us share that video with each and every one of you. And thank you all so much for everybody that has added in where you are zooming in from today. It's fantastic. So I do know that we are trying to get our peer Addie to join us. So Julie is working in the background, troubleshooting that. So hopefully she's able to join. And when she does, we'll give her the space and time to allow her to introduce herself. But in the meantime, we'll just go through a couple of housekeeping items with regards to Zoom. So as you would have heard when you joined or at the beginning, this session is being recorded. Following today's session, you will get a follow-up email from myself with a recording to this session, together with other sessions that we've done, some useful fact sheets on cannabis use and methods, and also with a very important survey. It'd be great if you do have the time to fill in this survey to let us know what worked for today's session, what you liked, and what we could improve on for either this session or future sessions. If you do have any questions throughout today's session, we have allocated time at the very end to answer any of questions that you may have if we can't get through them in the chat. But please use the chat as you have been using already to introduce yourself, and just go ahead and add any questions or comments that you have throughout the session. We are going to be using some features in today's session. I would like to say that depending on the Zoom, it's not volume, but the Zoom, oh my God, I've totally blanked out here. Depending on the version, there we go, that's the word I'm looking for. The version of Zoom that you have, you may or may not see this. And also if you're joining us on your phone or on a tablet, this may not show up. However, if you do see it, I'd like you to go ahead and hover along the top of your screen. You should see a little view options, and then click on annotate. That should open up a little box like this. If you have joined us in other sessions, you may be familiar with this already. And oh, there's Tareen, excellent. Jolene's getting ahead of herself. There she is with a little heart. So go ahead and click on the stamp where it has a little check mark, and you should see some hearts and some stars. So just want you to fill in this page. Go ahead and just add, there we go. Look at all the stars and hearts there are. Oh, fabulous. That's so good to see. Excellent. Yes. Oh, it's lighting up like a Christmas tree. Look at that. Brilliant. Okay, it is working fantastic with the check marks. Again, if you don't see this, excuse me, then please feel free to use the chat. All right, so thank you so much, everyone. I am going to clear this. So bear with me 1 second. And they are gone. Thank you so much. So remember that for later on. We did want to share that this is a webinar in a series of webinars around cannabis use. We have done 2 already back in October and November, and today session on Let's Chatter about Shatter. In that follow-up email, I will send you the link to those 2 that we've already done, should you have missed it. And also wanted to let you know of what webinars are coming in the new year. Essentially, we're going to be focusing on the effects of cannabis across the lifespan. So from preconception to pregnancy, breastfeeding, youth, and elders. So watch out for more emails from myself. If you have registered for one of these sessions in the past, you will automatically get an email from me when a new session is scheduled to take place. All right. Also, before I forget, I'm forgetting already, is that FNHA does have a YouTube channel, and these sessions are added into that YouTube channel as well. So for today's session, again, I am using Len Pierre's, who you heard from in the video. I'm using his words of how we intend for today. We are facilitators and learners and co-facilitators in this learning journey. So please ask questions, participate, and be present. We intend to honor the knowledge and wisdom of the communities we serve by centering Indigenous communities' values and experiences in relation to our professional practice. So to kind of get an idea of who is with us today, I'm just going to launch a poll. So go ahead and let us know. You can select more than one. Are you a nurse, a healthcare provider, a student? Do you identify as other? If so, feel free to share that in the chat. Oh, I see little hearts are being added on. That's great.
Gemma, Addie is with us now.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, she's just under my name. So if we want to, Addie, if you want to introduce yourself.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Addie from the Tla'amin Nation. I am a volunteer with the Tla'amin Health in the harm reduction and peer support worker for the Tla'amin Sustain, and also working with the Powell River Sustain. So thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. And it's great to see you, Addie. That's fantastic. Thank you so much for introducing yourself, and great timing. All right, I'm just going to clear these drawings and share the poll so that we can see. Oh, no, need to do this first and share the results. So Julie, Addie, you can take a look. We have a nice spread amongst all the different options that you see here. So about 50% of those of you that have joined are other. And then we've got nurses and healthcare providers. So that's great. People with lived or living experience. That's fantastic. Welcome, everyone. Welcome, Addie. I am going to stop sharing this little thing over here and move this. Sorry, I have two screens and so managing both. Okay, so in today's session, you are going to learn a little bit more about Shatter, how it's made, how it's consumed. We're going to discuss the cautions of high concentrate cannabis products and the link with psychosis. And then we are going to listen to Addie share her experience on using Shatter and other cannabis concentrates. One thing that we did want to share is that this session is coming from a neutral perspective. So we're not promoting the use of Shatter, and at the same time, we're not condoning the use of Shatter. Like, each individual is on their own healing journey, and we are so lucky to have Addie share her own personal experience around the use of Shatter. So, before beginning, just kind of wanted to give a little bit of a background, well, not background, but just like a little information around cannabis, the actual plant. So it is a broad term that refers to the dried and harvested flowers of a group of cannabis plants known as sativa, indica, and ruderalis, which is a form of hybrid. Cannabis does have over 400 components. No, it doesn't have components. It has compounds. Too many C's there. Including over 140 cannabinoids. Now, cannabinoids are chemicals that can change how cells communicate with one another. When in the brain, this can affect how someone perceives their environment, how they behave, how they think, and how they feel. So I pose a question to everyone on, does anybody know what are the two most commonly researched and known cannabinoids out there? Can anybody take a guess? You may use the chat. Marissa, fantastic. That is right. THC and CBD. Excellent. They said it all. Brilliant. That is correct. So CBD is, or known as cannabidiol, is the non-intoxicating component being studied for its anti-inflammatory properties. And then THC, or delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol, is the it's the psychoactive component of cannabis. It's really what gets you the high. It is being demonstrated to have some pain modulation, but also potential for dependence due to its euphoria-inducing properties. Now, if you do want to learn more, then watch that second webinar that we did on the effects of cannabis, where Twinkle and Kate, who are also with the 4 Directions team, go into greater detail on the effects of cannabis. I am loving all the hearts. I am going to also clear them away just so that we can all see these slides. All right. Cannabis forms, there are 2 main forms, that is the dry bud and the concentrates. And they're the common forms to make products like your edibles or joint and so on. So another question for you. Do you know what would happen if you were to eat the raw bud?
Nothing.
Addie got it. Oh, Jolene, Katie, nothing. That is correct. Nothing would actually happen to you because the cannabis has to be heated or decarboxylated to activate the THC and other cannabinoids, like for example, CBD when consumed. So eating it raw will produce no intoxicating effects. In the case of purchased edibles or oils or tinctures, then that process has already happened, so it can be consumed as such. Ironic, given it gives you the munchies. That is ironic, Julie. All right, so the dry bud, it is the most common form used due to the high concentration of cannabinoids, and that's your THC and CBD. It's usually smoked or vaped. If we look at concentrates, and that's what we're going to be taking a greater look at today in regards to Shatter. So concentrates have much higher levels of cannabinoids relative to the bud, making it considerably more potent. Concentrates are made through a process called extraction, where the cannabinoids, like the THC and CBD, are separated from the plant, resulting in essential oil that is then turned into your shatter, your wax, your bubble hash, and so on. So now we have another poll for you. So how many of you are familiar with Shatter? Have you heard about it? Do you know much? Ooh, look at that. Okay, gonna give it a couple more seconds. All right. So we have somewhat familiar or not familiar at all is the main people from the call today, and one person is very familiar, so that is fantastic. Excellent. Look at that, Julie and Addie. All right, let me stop sharing this and come back. There we go. Okay, so Shatter is known by several different names, including Shatter Wax, Cannabis Shatter, Shatter Weed. It is amber in color, semi-transparent, and has a brittle glass-like texture. It started to become very popular in the 2010s. It is anecdotally known as the crack of cannabis, as Shatter is a very concentrated form of cannabis extract with THC levels ranging from 60 to 90%. The cannabis bud, in comparison, roughly contains between 10 and 20%. It became legal when edibles became legal last year. It can cost anywhere from $35 to $700. And based on some of the websites that I've taken a look at, it can cost $35 per gram. Depending on the type of shatter, that you can get some that have THC, some that just have CBD. However, it's more commonly used for its high THC levels. Shatter is made using a solvent like butane or CO2, which extracts the concentrated form of the cannabis bud to form the shatter. During the heating process, as the cannabinoids and terpenes are extracted from the plant, the liquid is not agitated, resulting in that smooth, translucent texture. If you do know of clients that are making shatter at home, or if you are making shatter at home, just know that it can be extremely inflammable. And so just be cautious around that. It is consumed by a method called dabbing. So putting a tiny rice grain size amount on a very hot pin and inhaling the smoke that comes off it, which produces that really strong effect. So does anybody on the call, do you mind sharing, or do you know what other methods are there of consuming shatter?
Now they have vape pens and little gadgets that have heating coils in them where you press it. It's electronic. And it's done by extreme heat by the coils. So it has to have a very high temperature.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you, Addie. And I see Marissa and Tina have shared like the vape pens and mixing with coconut oil for consumption and baking. Oh, that is a new one. I had not heard of that. Thanks, Tina, for that.
Oh, well, there's another way how I can use my shatter.
There you go. Oh, great. Well, now that you have a little bit of more knowledge around like cannabis concentrates and shatter, I'm going to pass it over to Julie to guide us through the next part of the session.
Great. Thanks, Gemma. So just to start off, there is actually not a lot of research out there related to shatter and butane hash oil products. So the information we have, it's still evolving and coming, but just to note that. So what are the cautions? So people who are inexperienced using cannabis should not start with shatter. The onset is quick and the potency is strong. It has been noted that shatter can be extremely debilitating. It has been anecdotally referred to as the crack of cannabis. Studies have also shown that there's a risk for cardiotoxicity, so damage to the heart muscle, and respiratory failure that's related to dabbing. The other thing to note is that shatter is made, like Gemma said, using butane. So products made with butane have an increased risk of that person inhaling butane. So risks with butane inhalation include some renal damage, liver damage, cardiomyopathy, which can lead to heart failure, and a variety of psychiatric symptoms. So the risk is lessened if the process in which the product is made is regulated. So that does lessen the risk a little bit there. Shatter use is also associated with an increased risk of developing or worsening disorders related to anxiety and depression. And then finally, using products with higher levels of THC, like shatter, further increases the risks of mental health problems over time, specifically psychosis. So we're going to kind of be narrowing in to focus a little bit more on that. So question for you guys, are there any other dangers, or you people, are there any other dangers that you are aware of related to shatter? If you know any, feel free to please type those into the chat boxes. And yes, don't inhale coconut oil. That's a good point, Marissa.
Everyone's
And if we named them all, that's okay too. Okay, so we're gonna just talk about psychosis. So just a reminder of, oh, here's Beverly. Very dangerous for the developing brain. Yes, youth most at risk for psychosis. Absolutely. Yeah, we're gonna talk a little bit more about that. So, yeah, yes, thanks, Addie. Addie and me are both under the same name right now, so some comments will come up as me. So what psychosis is when people have trouble distinguishing between what is real and what is not. So when this occurs, it's called a psychotic episode, and it can be a very frightening and distressing experience for somebody, especially if it's the first episode. So just an important thing to note that an episode of psychosis does not mean that a person has schizophrenia. So psychosis can be a symptom of a variety of different mental illnesses. And I also just want to note that we need to also consider spiritual experience when we're talking about seeing or hearing things that others may not see or hear. It's always best to talk to an elder, a traditional healer, or a knowledge keeper if you're unsure or want more information about that. So we're going to move along to talk about more specifically psychotic symptoms. So for this slide, if you can please use the annotate feature and put a symbol on the images you think are psychotic symptoms.
So just as a reminder, just go ahead and click on that view options along the top. I see those check marks are happening and the little stars. And if you don't have this, feel free to share it using the chat. I love this. It's like again, lighting up like a little Christmas tree.
Yeah, excellent. So it looks like everybody is on the right track. So yeah, all of them are in fact symptoms of psychosis. So just to dive in a little bit more for each one. So that top left one, paranoia. So this is when people feel like people are following them, monitoring them, or trying to harm them. And then moving on to disorganized thoughts and speech. So this is when the communication pathways are impaired and answers to questions may be partially answered or completely unrelated to what you're talking about. And then going down to that crown, so delusional thinking. So these are false beliefs that are not based in reality. So, you know, people can think that they have exceptional ability or fame, like they are the queen. And then finally, hallucinations, which involve, you know, seeing, hearing, or feeling things that don't exist. Again, be mindful of that spiritual component as well.
All right.
Okay.
Let me just clear all of these beautiful little stamps and drawings. All right. There you go.
Perfect. So when we talk about cannabis and psychosis, they are linked. However, this does not mean that cannabis directly causes psychosis. Some people are more vulnerable to it. So genetic stress and childhood trauma can make an individual more vulnerable to psychosis. As Beverly had said about the risk for youth, so the Canadian Psychiatric Association cautions regular cannabis use before the age of 21 because early and regular use increases the risk of psychosis who are vulnerable. So the younger that somebody uses cannabis products with higher THC, the more likeliness of psychosis occurring. Environmental factors may also trigger a psychotic episode, such as a stressful event or substance use. And finally, an imbalance in dopamine and serotonin in the brain can also be a factor. So we're going to do a little poll. So based on what you have heard so far, which product is most likely to cause psychosis? If you want to just pick the answer there.
Oh, I see the answers coming in. Everyone's been listening, which is great. All right. I'm just going to share the results.
Perfect. Yeah. So as Gemma had explained earlier, Shatter has high levels of THC, or can. The most common shatter has high levels of THC. So that's great. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. So already cannabis use is associated with a 40% increase of psychosis, and that risk of psychosis increases the higher the THC content is. So more frequent use and higher concentrations increase that risk of psychosis over time. So again, going back to the young adults and youth, so who have developed psychosis, continued use worsen symptoms and functional outcomes over time. So yeah, that just doesn't mix well. Interestingly though, CBD is known to reduce some of the effects of THC. So therefore there has been some speculation that CBD may be a protective factor for psychosis. Great question. We'll get to that. This is a consumer review. So this poll was taken from a website that sells cannabis products. So I thought it was interesting to note that in the review section, 27% of people reported paranoia for a shatter product that was at a 60% THC level, which is an interesting review there. So now we're going to move on to some care considerations. So cannabis is a medicine and does have appropriate uses. When we talk about care considerations, we want to approach it from a harm reduction framework. Thinking of pain management, cannabis is considered to be safer for use than opioids, especially with the current crisis. We want to emphasize the importance of starting low and going slow. And then if possible, find out what the THC and CBD content is. Remember, the lower the THC, the less the risk, and the higher the CBD, the better. More things we want to consider. So if possible, non-smoking alternatives like edibles are better. You want to avoid inhaling too deeply to protect the lungs. Your own mental health history is important. While cannabis can help some people with anxiety, as an example, it can also worsen anxiety and panic for others. Family history of mental health is also significant, especially if there's a family history of psychosis or schizophrenia. And finally, use cannabis in a safe place if possible with people you feel safe around. Okay, so we're going to talk about some nursing interventions. So if you are working with a client who reacts negatively to cannabis, note that it may be managed in the nursing station or health center safely with supports from, say, the First Nations Virtual Substance Use and Support Services line. Note that the symptoms should resolve within 30 minutes to 6 hours. So if it's if the client reacts negatively
Hi, Rissa, how are you? Thank you for calling me back. I'm just on this webinar, so I'm sure.
It's okay, I'm muted.
Perfect, okay. Where was I here? Sorry, that distracted me. Okay, yeah, so the symptoms should resolve within 30 minutes to 6 hours. You want to make sure you're approaching it from a non-judgmental point of view. You can move the person to a quiet space with minimal stimuli or surrounding that they are familiar with, just to help encourage the person and the brain to just rest a bit. And it may be helpful to seek someone who knows the person well to help support. So if the person is having hallucinations or delusional thinking, you want to make sure you assess the significance of this. So for example, is it frightening? Are the voices telling them to do something? Are they at risk for suicide and suicidal thoughts? You want to acknowledge the client's fears. For example, if the client is worried about their food or water being poisoned, you want to provide them with sealed snacks or a sealed water bottle. You want to redirect them to here and now, but you do not want to try and convince the client that the hallucinations or delusions are not real. That cannot go well. You want to reassure the client of their current safety, and then consulting with other people like prescribers, doctors or NPs, you can administer any appropriate medications or PRNs as prescribed. And then we just want to talk about, if it is an emergency and the client is experiencing active psychosis with safety concerns, you just want to make sure you always follow the nursing station and health center emergency protocols, which may include transferring the client to a higher level of care. And I will get to those questions after we hear from Addie over here.
Thanks so much.
Go ahead, Gemma.
Thanks so much, Julie. That's fantastic. It's so interesting to see the sides of using Shatter and that what it could cause. And that leads us into the great conversation that we're going to have with Addie now. So Addie, is your mic on? Are you ready?
Oh, hi.
Yeah. Hi, Addie. Okay, so we have got a few questions for you. So how does Shatter help you?
Well, I got introduced to that actually through an old high school buddy who also had a problem with, I guess, an opioid addiction. And that was her sort of introduction to me. And I did start using Shatter. I guess, it is I guess you can call it a harm reduction to perhaps cocaine or heroin. And although Shatter is quite strong, I feel like I've resorted to lesser dosage. My experimentation with it was overwhelming, but it is helped me, I guess, in transition because I deal with PTSD. I deal with intergenerational trauma issues, and of course I struggle as well in my own personal problems. So I don't use it as much as I used to use it. Mm-hmm. But it definitely did help, I guess, crutch, because it is, I think it is a little bit safer, but now that I've been more educated with FNHA, that, it all depends on how it is created, because some people sell it privately and I think it is sold in the government stores. Mm-hmm. So I guess you have to think about, all the harm stuff that you inhale, but, it can help, for somebody like me for a transition.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And thank you so much for sharing like how, the journey that you've taken and how you started using it and then realizing of the potency and where you are now. So with that, do you have any concerns about using Shatter?
Well, I think it's been an educational process for me doing these projects that Julie and Gemma have been doing. I think the high concentrations of Shatter is definitely a concern. So now that I know that, I definitely will bear that in mind. And I think other people should bear that in mind as well. So I wouldn't recommend it on a daily use. I would, I wouldn't recommend it for anybody because it is quite strong and it's a little more expensive, and the gadgets that you have to consume it in, they're also more expensive. So, it can be a little more expensive, say, compared to regular cannabis, which, is a little lesser expensive. Mm-hmm. And you get a little bit more, but it may not be as strong. But, if the chronic users that I know in people that I've interacted with in my nation, some of them are more comfortable on using it on a daily basis, but I don't think I'm very functional, let's put it that way. If I do Shatter, it would probably be in the evening time. Mm-hmm. And I still think it is a little bit better than alcohol, because as with age, we don't, I don't feel like you get like hangovers from Shatter compared to you'll get hangovers from alcohol. So, that's I guess a benefit.
That would go to the first question. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so for those of us that are on the call who may be working with people who are using Shatter, like what would you recommend for them to know about? So for those nurses and healthcare providers, or even if you have family members who are using Shatter.
Well, a lot of people who use cannabis products joke around about it because, it brings that euphoria to you, the happiness. But if I would recommend to nurses working with people to Shatter, basically just know their limits. And if it is too potent or too strong and they have all of these hallucinations or anything like that, then maybe they should consider lowering the dosage or not using it at all, or getting professional opinion like a psychiatrist or a psychologist, because I think our brain chemistries affect with chemicals differently. I've been trying to figure out these things and how it impacts, me as a personal person, like me personally. Mm-hmm. So I think, it's definitely not as potent as, say, the opioids, but it still can cause damage. And I think nurses or anybody in the medical field, because of the legalization of cannabis, I would just say that, it would have to be on an individual basis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Wow. Thank you so much, Addie. And Kate is sharing great insights from yourself. And thank you so much for sharing and for letting us know what you've gone through and why you've used it. And I think it's really important for all of us to have that at the forefront, that the reasoning for using any substance, there's always a reasoning behind it. So with that, I did just want to share, before I open the floor up to any questions that people may have to either Addie, Julie, or myself, just remember that Shatter is one form of the concentrates. You can have, like the wax or hash oil. I'll bring up that slide again with all the different types of concentrates that people may be using. We just went straight through Shatter because we know that that's a lot of what we hear of some of the community members that are using. So I'll open up the floor. Does anybody have any questions for Addie or Julie? And feel free to either add it to the chat or unmute yourself. Well, everybody's saying thank you. Oh, Tamara, out of the concentrate, which is the strongest and how do they compare? That is a great question. I would definitely say that Shatter is up there in terms of percentage of THC. How do they compare? I'd have to look that up, Tamara, to find out exactly between the different concentrates. Do you know, Addie, at all?
I seem to be on freeze or something here.
Oh, I can still see you.
Okay, so I know people have talked about hash and the bubble hash and the wax, which I'm not too familiar with, but I think they're quite potent because people always say to use very little of those as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I can see like Heather is crumbles can be even higher, and it's the solid THC essentially. So I think, yeah, I would probably mimic with what Heather's saying, that the higher the THC, that would be the factor to look into.
Yeah, and you know, edibles, like when I first tried cannabis, you know, there can be some of them very, very strong because I took some, thankfully I wasn't driving then, but I was using the transit, and I ended up hiding, and it's a funny story, but I ended up hiding in the bathroom because I got really paranoid and I didn't want anybody to see me. And I had to go from one end of the mall to the bus station and try to go home. I couldn't even shop because it was so highly concentrated. And so when people start experimenting with cannabis, you really need to know, because I've known people, elders and seniors, you know, that, you know, some of them will do different types of cannabis products, but you really kind of have to, I guess that's why it's important for people to know the different types of products. Like when I go into the government stores, there are people there that try to help you to pick what you're looking for, or what, you know, sometimes people are there because they have anxiety, or they're dealing with grief, or they're dealing with depression or pain. And so, you know, cannabis has been, I guess, the less harmful drug, because, you know, it did become legal in Canada, but there are some products that are very strong. And that was probably the only time I felt paranoid using cannabis products. And my roommate kind of laughed at me because I was supposed to meet with them and I couldn't even bother shopping because it was too strong. So it does happen where, you know, people do get scared and paranoid because of the potency of them. And that includes, you know, people of all ages.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Thank you for that. I'm going.
Addie,
Mm.
how long did that paranoia last for you on that occasion?
Well, it was a chocolate that looked like a turtle and it looked yummy. So I was hungry at that day, but I didn't know it was that strong. I ate half of it. And I think it lasted for a good hour or maybe hour and a half or two. My friend came back home on the bus and started laughing at me because I couldn't even shop. So I would say it must have lasted about an hour or two. Yeah. And I had somebody in this community that told me, like, they were two elders, and one of them had to go and sleep over at the other elder's home because of the paranoia. And like, you have to be careful. It wasn't Shatter, but it was definitely cannabis. And I don't know how long she lasted for. So, you know, this is when they were privately owned. It wasn't taken over by the government. And this person was grieving because of the loss of their husband and was just trying to help something to calm her or help her sleep because she couldn't sleep at night, but it was definitely too strong. So, you know, the education and awareness of cannabis and concentrates and what's in them, you know, I would, you know, for people who use for first time, definitely shouldn't be trying these stronger, more heavily concentrated. And at that time, I didn't know what to ask for. I just said, I want that. And, you know, and now I know you have to do them in portions to what you can tolerate. Some people do have higher tolerance levels, though.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Kira, yours was the second to next question. What I would also say that based on the information that I've seen is really mimicking what Addie's saying, that some of the effects can last anywhere between 30 minutes and 6 hours, just to give you a broader range from what I've seen as part of some of the studies. Beverly also had a question, which I will guide to you, Addie. Does Shatter affect your appetite and breathing?
I typically, that's the downfall, is yes. You know, when I, you know, the couch potato type, and the sativa obviously is more functional for me. So I tend to lean towards sativa now. The hybrids and the other ones are really, because I also deal with my weight issues and my other health. I deal with chronic back pain since I was 19, and I'm in my late 40s now. So that is a downfall. And yes, it can obviously make you eat more. And so I would just say, you know, I'm trying to figure out a way, you know, where I don't actually use Shatter as much anymore now.
Thank you for sharing that from your personal perspective. And Julie, from a clinical perspective, the respiratory, we'd found some info on like when you're smoking in the butane or potential butane and the harms of that.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's risk for inhaling anything into your lungs. But yeah, the specific risks around that butane inhalation, because it's kind of like huffing, right? So, it can lead to heart failure. It can lead to respiratory failure. So yeah, and you know, cardiotoxicity, and so it's not good at all for your lungs.
Yeah. And I would like to share that in that follow-up email, we will provide you with this presentation in PDF format. And the very last slide does have a list of different references that you can also read up for anybody that's more interested in like further research on some of the things that we've shared today. Okay. What else? All right, so Katie, I've not heard of Shatter before this. If it's expensive, is this a common substance in BC Lower Mainland? I don't know the figures in BC Lower Mainland, but I do know that anecdotally among community members, it is used quite a bit. Do you know, Julie? I don't have, I think it's quite hard to identify just Shatter. Yeah,
so one of the other practice consultants, she is from the Quesnel area, and Jolene, and she said that Shatter will make an appearance in the community, and it'll be there for a couple months, and emergency rooms and psychiatric consults really increase during that time, and then it won't be around for months. So it kind of comes in waves, and then other communities, they kind of always have it. Because people make it in their house, like Gemma had said, which is very dangerous. So yeah, and then there was just another question here about the websites listing the THC products. So some do and some don't. So that consumer review product, I actually had to ask the chat bar to say, can you tell me what percentage of THC this is that you're talking about? So I think, yeah, some do and some don't.
Yeah, and I know that the BC government one, it doesn't actually show percentage. It just shows the milligrams. So the amount of milligrams of THC or CBD that it would have. So I guess it would just be more of a question like to figure out like what the percentage is so that you, so that people know.
This is a good question for Addie. I don't know, Addie, if you saw it yet. Did you find that your experience of trying what worked and what didn't helped you to find out what was best? or did you find any good places to guide you with information?
Can you say that again? Sorry.
Yeah, I think like, did you kind of experiment and find what was best for you, or did someone kind of give you some information and then you tried, you know, different products and then decided from there?
Well, you know, I took all those materials that they give you about the, you know, I guess the science behind it or whatever. I think it was just my personal experience, you know, to use sativa and to actually use the bud rather than the cannabis, only because I feel that cannabis is a little bit too strong, and that, yeah, it does hurt your chest because of the inhaling, which I'm not a deep inhaler, like I never was a smoker. So I prefer the capsules, you know, because I want to keep my nice smile, and I don't want to stain my teeth, because that was one thing that I didn't like about smoking. So, you know, it's trial and error. You know, some people use it on a daily basis. I've got neighbors that this whole area, everybody says they can smell marijuana from all throughout the yard here, because there are a lot of people who are very heavy users of cannabis, and they have high tolerance level. Like I have a sibling that smokes it every day like a cigarette. So they quit smoking to use cannabis. They quit tobacco cannabis. There are people who quit drinking and chose cannabis. There are people who have quit opioids and used cannabis. And, you know, there are a lot of baby boomers, you know, that are retired, and, you know, they like cannabis products. So it seems like it's, you know, I guess the less harmful, but, you know, definitely Shatter is, you know, I guess maybe if, you know, if you really, you know, wanted to, it's very intoxicating. It's very strong. The first time I had Shatter, it was given to me by somebody, told me, and oh, it was very, very strong. And I said, wow, this is completely different than alcohol. And, you know, people laugh at me, right? Because I started with cannabis and people have taken advantage of me. And I was robbed one time where I was sitting in the living room. I was just watching a movie one night, and a friend came by and was stealing all my jewelry, and I couldn't even move off of my sofa. So, you know, it can severely impair you if you're not familiar with cannabis. And you need to really know. And I felt terrible and I was embarrassed, but I didn't know that until I seen them wearing my jewelry, maybe like 6 months later, because I did notice it was gone and they were taken forever in my bathroom. So you definitely don't want to impair yourself or be a victim of being paralyzed, because it definitely, in my earlier, now that I think about it, it really impaired me, and I was very embarrassed about it. So I prefer sativa, and I prefer, you know, the bud, or the alternative form is the capsules, and not so highly in dosage, because you know, for somebody like me, I've experimented, unfortunately, with different things in my life. And, you know, it's really sad because, you know, even the youth, they think it's fine. Like, you know, I grew up with a relative having it, and, you know, because kids are curious, you know, so you have to really be cautious about if you're a parent or if you have children around, and definitely make sure it doesn't get in their hands, because you never know what could happen, especially with the highly concentrated cannabis stuff. They might think it's candy. So you know, I myself have a hard time opening those things that I get from the government store because, you know, they're childproof, right? But you need to have that.
It's just like other little bottle of medications where even like to get some Advil, I really struggled.
Well, it's even harder to get into the cannabis than it is from my pharmacy stuff, right? So, and they also have drinks too. This isn't cannabis drink by any means. This is vitamin water, but I've had that one. And instead of buying alcohol, I'll go to the government store and I'll buy a can of that. And, it's nice. It's tranquil. I don't get the hangovers the next day. So
thanks for sharing all of that, Addie.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. And thank you for everyone for your participation. Thank you to Julie for providing your insight from clinical considerations. And I guess that we are now at time. We're 2 minutes over. Oh, thank you, Keir. Yes, that would be my ESL coming out there. But wanted to say thank you so much, Addie, truly for sharing your experience and your knowledge and your own healing journey, what you've experimented with to get to where you are today. Thank you, everyone, for your great participation, and watch out for that email from me in the next couple of days with all these wonderful resources for you. So thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful rest of your week.